inshallah. There's water there too. If I'm going to request everybody to just make sure their phones are in silent, even make sure they're not on vibrate, because if it's on the table and it vibrates, that will cause a bit of a disturbance, inshallah. The structure for the day is, we're starting basically at 10:15, which is not ideal, but inshallah we'll gain some time through the day. We're going to have 4 1-hour sessions basically. And that includes about a 10, maybe 15-minute break, just so that we can step out and refresh ourselves. Handouts are available. If anybody doesn't have a handout, just put up your hand and we can get one to you now, inshallah. Otherwise, you can just see us at the back table over there and you can pick up a handout. There are also extra pens and paper over there if anybody needs. We are here to learn, inshallah. And this is at the core of what we're doing today. It's all about learning and upskilling ourselves, so that we are better placed to do what God wants from us, basically. So inshallah, don't be shy of that. And with that in mind, the day-to-day really relies very much on your input. So discussion is welcome, questions are welcome. If you have queries and curiosities, feel free to pitch in and raise them, inshallah. I'm sure Ustad Noor won't mind. Having said that, we will try to rein it in if we go a bit too far from the topic we're covering through the themes. I'm sure you've had a chance to just flick through your handout, so you have some idea of the ground we're going to cover, inshallah. Just to give a few introductions, inshallah, this event is being hosted by Seminarium. Some of you who live more locally will be aware of us, but really we haven't really done a launch event or anything. We're not really very much about the marketing and such at the moment. It's a matter of providing much needed services and providing the quality rather than fronting and having all the glossy stuff and inside there's not very much. But just to give you a bit of an introduction to Seminarium, inshallah, we're just a bunch of concerned parents and professionals within the education sector, given the shortcomings of conventional schooling, we've noted that there is a need for holistic personal development for our children and future generations of Muslims in the UK, inshallah. To this end, we aim to work in providing a dynamic blend of child development and human development, really, for adults too. So we take into consideration conventional schooling, academia and the like, traditional learning rooted within the Islamic tradition, our faith practice, and the most up-to-date, cutting-edge research within the fields of child education and human development too. So this is just part of that broader project. Our flagship project is the Growery, which some of you might be aware of, which is a primary school-aged provision, which is not a school, and it's not exactly homeschooling, but we're trying to imagine a new way of educating our next generation, inshallah. So perhaps when we have time in the breakout sessions or in the breaks, we can talk more about that. Feel free to come and speak to any of us if you like. Just a word about our presenter today, inshallah, Noor Chaudhry. He's been working within this field for quite a long while. He's cut his teeth, spending more than 7 years working within community development, doing a variety of different projects, if I'm not mistaken, in East London. Yeah. So very much familiar with the needs of our community, especially in the southeast of the UK. He's a parenting consultant and author. He's the founder of Human Aid UK, for which I think he's still a trustee, is that right? Yeah. And the founder of Involved Fathers. Really, he'll give a better idea of what he's all about, but really what seems is his attention is how do we, in a world where parents have not been taught how to be parents, how do we provide the right coaching and mentorship for parents, not just for fathers, though that's where his work began with. Today will be a broader presentation for both parents, mother and father. How do we rehabilitate ourselves to be better parents, inshallah, and we will be seeing that coming through today. He has a diploma in child psychology. He's a trained counselor and life coach, so we'll be seeing and benefiting from his rich experience, inshallah, today. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Noor, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Firstly, just before we kick off, I do like to get to know a bit of information about those who are here in the room. So just very quick round. I'd like to just get a couple of bits of information just so we can start off with. So just, if everyone can go around, just the name, number of children. I know obviously if the couple's on the table then some of the answers will be the same. And just how long you've been a parent, i.e. the age of your oldest child really. So if I start from maybe my right and we work our way kind of down, it'd be good just to get that information, shall we? So
Mustafa, got 5 children, the eldest is 15.
inshallah.
My name is Atufa.
The answer is the same, yeah.
My name's Dane. I've stepdaughter that's 10 years old.
Yep.
I'm Sabra.
Okay.
Wali, eldest is 7.
Same background, same
Sister?
My name is Summer. I have 2 children, expecting another one, and eldest is 3.
Black, bro?
James Brown, 3 kids, eldest is 12.
12.
My name is Atif, I've got 3 kids, eldest 5.5.
Okay.
I'm Burhan. I haven't got any kids because I recently got married, so inshallah.
Cover, eldest is 18.
Sadaf.
Asfar, eldest is 7. 2 kids.
Talha, 3 kids, eldest is 6 next month, inshallah.
Simon.
I'm Sharik, I've got 3 kids.
My oldest is 13, and then it's 10 and 6-year-old.
My name is Ahmad, I've got 3 children, eldest is 36.
6.
My name is Jawad. I've got 2 daughters, eldest is 7.
My name is Shasta, and my eldest is 5.
Okay, inshallah. I'm sure some more parents will join us. I think the key important thing with anything that we do that's related to parenting and being a parent is sometimes we don't realize the strength we have within the community and the support. And one of the key things that we have is if we can create support structures around us, that's usually the best form and the best way of really getting the support you need in order to support in the raising of the children. And as you know, there's an age-old saying that you heard a proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And that is a very true statement. And when we look at a journey of maybe our ancestors or those who came before us, what you'll find is that village did exist around them. And we'll go into that into more detail. And what we're struggling with today in today's society is that the push towards individualism is creating distant families and people, and just basically a mother or a father, or maybe just a single parent who's that raising that child. So really the strength is within, for example, this room. And I think that's an important concept to start with, because a lot of the times we may feel as parents, and we've all gone through a journey where maybe we're feeling we're doing things wrong, maybe we're not adequate enough. And the reality is that we have people around here. So inshallah, as we have those sessions and we have breaks, and we in those breaks, if you don't already know one another, try and get to know one another, because that support you can get from one another is rich. And collectively here in this room, what we have here is 115 years worth of parenting experience. So when you looked at each one of you with your oldest child, if you add that together, collectively, that's how much experience is within this room. And that's the mindset we should start with from the beginning, that in fact the answers can lie within here and not necessarily have to look externally. And I'm very much against people who would present themselves as a parenting expert, as if that they are, they know it all. The reality is you know your children best. And inshallah, in the session as we go through it, whatever we talk about, you need to just have in your mind that, okay, how do I take what I'm hearing here and adapt it and apply it to my child? What are the obstacles that my child is facing, and how can I adjust whatever we're learning to my child? And that's the key part. So inshallah, I'm not here to lecture you, I'm not here of any sorts like that, and I'm really against that concept. Rather, I like learning, and in fact, within any sessions I've delivered, I tend to learn. I feel like I learn the most, because there's so much to take away from each and every one of you in the sessions, inshallah. So, just to kickstart, myself, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Noor. I am a father of 6 children myself, and my eldest is 17, and he works all the way down the different ages until my youngest was 7. So that's the kids that we have. 4 boys and 2 girls. One of my child has got autism and as well as ADHD as well. So there's a spectrum of experience I've had through my children. And one of the key things that I did in terms of when we set up Involved Fathers was very, very specific, that as the brother mentioned at the beginning, that the issues we're facing in society here today, and how do we navigate our children and help them grow in this society, there wasn't very much out there from the Muslim perspective. And there's very little out there, specifically, for example, for fathers. And we're seeing a new generation of parents who are growing and who are raising their children, and they want to be involved in their child's life. And sometimes you just don't know how we navigate, how can we nurture them, how can we overcome these obstacles. And so a lot of this was put together to bring 2 aspects together. One was those established child psychology theories, and basically merging them with what Islam has taught us, or what the Prophet ﷺ taught us in the Quran and Sunnah, and bringing that together and then applying that. And what you see generally, most things that exist within child psychology are things that the Prophet ﷺ already talked about and actually addressed. It just hasn't been packaged in this nice fancy way with these new terminologies that exist today. So that's just a brief introduction to myself. I've got first, just as a task, just to get us into the right frame of mind, inshallah. So if everybody picks up the pen, you've got the paper in front of you, inshallah. Yeah. So you picked up the pen. I'm sure you've all got your pen in your strong hand, isn't it? Yeah. So if you can switch it and move it to your weaker hand. Yeah. And if you can write the following. The first one is, can you write your full name as it appears in your passport? Yeah. So with your weaker hand, your not usual writing hand, your weaker hand, write your full name as it appears in the passport with your weaker hand. It's easier if those who have shorter names, I'm sure they finish quicker than those with their longer passport names. Next one, with your weaker hand again, you can just write your date of birth. One more task. With your weaker hand, can you do your signature? So don't worry, I'm not going to ask for your bank details next. Have a look at each other's by all means, and you can evaluate how legible they are and how good it is. How do you generally find that experience? Just a shout out, inshallah.
Looks like my daughter wrote it.
Okay, a daughter wrote it, inshallah. Anyone else? How do you find this? How does it look?
Looks fine.
I can
Apart
see
from my
my
signature.
MashaAllah.
I can
Yeah,
see my
makes
son's writing.
Son's right. Now, what we're going to realize is a lot of us, I think a lot of the parents here have maybe multiple children. Some of you have one, and a couple of you have children. But for those of us, for example, who have multiple children, what would tend to happen is when you enter into your parenting journey is, if you remember right at the beginning of your child when they're born, the first child that's born, they say like a parent takes every step with their child. Like every single moment is watched and followed and sometimes celebrated. And you see that a lot, you know, and that's why you tend to find that the oldest child has a different kind of relationship sometimes than the second and third and so forth. Now, in this, for example, when you are writing your name, when was maybe the last time you actually thought about every single stroke you are taking in writing your name? Or, for example, in your signature, when was the last time you actually thought about every stroke you did? Maybe it was when you did the passport application, maybe you saw it's within the box and you're writing your name. But what happens in life is, even with the signature, maybe the first time you ever wrote a signature, you maybe had your full name maybe written in there, and then over time you might have ended up kind of evolving and becoming a squiggle of some sort. But now when we do a signature, we don't think, we just basically sign. When you write your name, you just write it. And maybe now in this instance, we move to our left hand, you're thinking about every single stroke you're taking. And that's generally life. That in life, especially when you're as a parent, what tends to happen is we have our child and we think about a lot of things and we evaluate a lot of things. And then those of us who have got a second child, maybe the first time we got a child is a bit fragile and we're holding them. But now that when the second child is born, you're feeling a bit more comfortable and maybe you're just throwing them around a bit. You're playing with them. Maybe you're how you're changing them. It's easier. Come the third child, maybe it's completely different. And what that means is, just like most things in life, we move on to what's called autopilot. So we start parenting and then we move into autopilot. We just do things because, we know how things are done. And we move on, And sometimes that can be good, but a lot of the times it can also be negative. In the sense that we're not paying and giving due care and attention to every child and everything that's happening with them. And so the whole aim of what I always say with anything we come to, so everyone who's turned up here today, it's an opportunity for us to do three things. Firstly is to pause. Because on the parenting journey, as we're going through life, we're just doing things. We just, you get married and then you have a child and then you're just moving and you're moving. And we don't always get an opportunity to pause. So the first thing here today is it gives us opportunity to pause. And that's what I would like in your mind, just to pause. And secondly is that we have opportunity to then reflect. Just to look back and think, okay, what am I doing with my children? What are the issues that I'm facing? And a lot of it is introspective. We need to look internally within ourselves and answer some questions. And the third thing after that is to shake things up, to change it. And that's your parenting journey in a nutshell. That along the way, we're always going to have opportunities and times that we need to pause, reflect, and change things up. And inshallah, hopefully today is an opportunity in the session. It's a short session. I've got longer courses that I deliver. This is a shorter aspect of it. And inshallah, it'll give you the opportunity. We'll touch upon different aspects. It may not be everything that you maybe came in your mind today to get solved. But inshallah, maybe we'll have the opportunity in some of the question and answer times and the break times to try and address some of those issues as well. So as we go through the session, we're going to have the sections. So if you've got any questions related to the sections we're talking about, inshallah, feel free to put your hand up and we'll flow through quite naturally. Anything that may be a bit more detailed and specific to your situation, they may not be as relevant to others, maybe we can try and take that in the break times and by all means you can come up and we can have a conversation there, inshallah. So that way it keeps the session as relevant as possible to everybody and everybody can benefit from it, inshallah. So now we move forward. So today's session is about the role of a parent in Islam. And the first thing to understand is what does everybody here think is, in one word, you could try to encapsulate, what is your role as a parent? What do you think Allah has bestowed us with children? And what do you feel our role is required? What does Allah require us or from us for our children?
guide them.
To guide them.
Okay.
Tarbiyah.
Role model.
Role model. Inshallah, feel free. You might have to loosen up a bit if it gets a bit. So, again, there's many aspects generally that we look at when we think of as a parent. The other words come in when we have to nurture them. Yeah. We need to, again, spiritually look after them. We need to, like I said, guide them. And all of these kind of words come together. So yes, obviously it's already kind of a bit already in the handout, but one of the key things that Allah wants from us as a parent in the role is tarbiyah. Yeah, is to provide that role, be that role of a murabbi, to provide or to enact tarbiyah upon our child. So when we look at the definition, when we say tarbiyah, so what do we understand by the term tarbiyah? What do you think it means?
Upbringing.
Sorry?
That's the upbringing of the child.
The upbringing of the child.
Give them the right education.
Right education,
Values and principles.
values and principles. Okay.
Skills.
Skills. So when we look at the word tarbiyah, in its kind of definition of it, and it's taken from Ibn Ashur's tafsir of Rabb al-Alameen, and Allah refers to in Surah Fatiha as Rabb al-Alameen. It's to take your child stage by stage, i.e. nurturing them, yeah, to their ultimate fruition, growth. That's the final. So it's fulfilling their potentials as Muslims. So this is something that was adopted from Ibn Ashur's tafsir of Rabb al-Alameen. So it's a journey. So tarbiyah is a journey for your child where you take them stage by stage, and the aim is what? To reach the full potential. Which is, what is the full potential we want from our child? We want them to become mu'mineen, to be believers. And so that's the journey we're taking for a child. So what Allah wants for us is to provide this role, to take them on this journey. Now, sometimes we conflate, there's two words, there's tarbiyah and there's another word called ta'lim. And we conflate sometimes these two words. And it's important we kind of separate them, because sometimes we think we're providing tarbiyah to our child when we send them to a madrasa, an evening madrasa, a weekend maktab, and they're learning. But that isn't tarbiyah. That is what we refer to as ta'lim. So ta'lim is your fact-based learning, you could say, where you learn certain things. You learn the different aspects of the religion. This is what you do. So if we use an example, a good example between the difference between tarbiyah and ta'lim, let's use the example of salah. So what would salah, for example, when you teach your child that you raise your hands, you hold them, then you say the thana, then you say fatiha, then you say a surah, then you go to ruku, sujood. How you do all of those arkan of salah is what you refer to as ta'lim. You're teaching them how to pray. And the tarbiyah, if you want to talk about it, would be after your child finishes the salah, that you embrace them and you ask them, what did you ask Allah for when you were in sujood? So it's making that salah come alive. It's giving it life. Because we can teach our children all day long how to pray. But what's the function of prayer? And so what we want to do is make that come alive. And that's like an analogy to use that differentiates between tarbiyah and ta'lim. And the Shaykh Salman al-Awda was asked the question. He said, he was asked the question, how do I get my children to love salah? An important question, and I'm sure it's in all of our minds. We want our children to love salah. And so how? And he gave a list of answers. And the first point he said, the first point of how, he said, have your child, what? Love you. So you want them to love salah, have your child love you. Because if they love you, and you love salah, then they will love salah because they love you. Because children, if they are connected with you, then everything will follow through. And we see that. And that's the basic principle of all parenting, which is, it's not about the right and the wrong. These things come. But the basic foundation is build that relationship with your child. If they are not connected with you, it doesn't matter how many rights and wrongs you teach them. It will stray and it will rip and it will fall apart. The key part of anything is build that relationship with your child. And we'll go through some steps, inshallah, in the session of practically how we can do some of those things, inshallah. So, when we look at, for example, as I mentioned, so tarbiyah is founded upon a relationship, as I said. It's a relationship thing. They need to be in connection with you. And we see, for example, in the ayat of Quran, where Allah says, the dua that children should say for their parents is what? رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِ صَغِيرًا. Oh, Allah have mercy on them, our parents, for what? Because they did Rabbayani when I was small, when I was little. And so, a lot of the times when we translate this, it says, oh, Allah have mercy on them as they had mercy on me. It's sometimes the translation of it that's used. But that's not the correct translation. When we look at the term, Rabbayani. Hopefully that's better to see. Yeah? And so, when we look at what does Rabbayani mean, it's from the root word coming from, it's come from tarbiyah. So that means that, oh, Allah have mercy on them because they enacted or did the action of tarbiyah upon me when I was small. They nurtured me, they raised me. All of those other English words that we can find, they don't give the justice to the meaning of the word. So the reality is what? The dua is asking for mercy on the parents. So how does the parent get mercy? Because they fulfill this function of tarbiyah. So that's our role as a parent. And how we get the mercy from Allah is by providing this role and being that murabbi to our children. So, if we know that, So if we know that this is the role of a parent that we need to face, that we are the murabbis, the ones who are providing tarbiyah to our children, then one of the best ways to follow is that of what the Prophet ﷺ said. Okay, so if we need to pay tarbiyah, the question comes how? How is it that we do this? What's the functions? What do we need to do? So a good example is to look back at the companions. And as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said, I enjoin upon you to follow my companions and those after them and those after them. So this is within our deen, that when we look back and we take learning, we look at the seerah, the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But then we see a lot of that, we think, okay, the Prophet ﷺ was a prophet. Maybe some things in our minds we feel like that's unattainable because he was a prophet, though I would argue, obviously, we know he's a man. So there's many things that were miraculous and there's other things that were human. So when we understand that, in the terms of parenting, what he did wasn't miracle, it was just human interactions. So there's things we can definitely take from that. But we can look at the Sahabas, and the Tabi'in, and the Tabi'in, and to see from them and their generation, what did they do, and how did they raise their children? And if we can take some inspiration from that, and then see, okay, how do we apply it to today? And inshallah, maybe we can find that winning formula. So, if we're now looking towards the Sahabas, I want you to move to this hadith. It's a very important hadith. It's in your inshallah. So, this hadith, it says, surely the halal is clear and the haram is clear, and between those two are doubtful, unclear matters that many of the people you have not knowledge of. So whoever abstains from the doubtful matters has saved his religion and his honor. And whoever falls into the doubtful matters falls into the haram. Just like a shepherd who pastures around a sanctuary is likely to indulge freely, grazing therein. Truly everything has a sanctuary, and Allah's sanctuary is his prohibitions. Verily, in the body there is a morsel of flesh, that if it is correct, then the whole body is set aright. And if it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. It is the heart. It's a very deep hadith. And a lot of the times we've heard this last part, which is about the morsel of flesh. So a lot of the times it's just quoted the end part. And sometimes we don't realize actually that hadith is part of a larger hadith that talks about the halal and the haram, what is clear, and to stay away from the doubtful matters. So this hadith, again, it's a Sahih hadith from Bukhari and Muslim. But when we look at this hadith, it's one of the hadith from the Arba'in Nawawi, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. And the reality is do we really know how important this hadith is? And when we see Imam Ahmed, he said that the principles of Islam are based on 3 hadith. Which hadith do you think were 3 he referred to after? Yeah, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. That every action is by the intention. Yeah? What's another one? Umar? Of? Yeah. So here he says the hadith of actions about our intentions. The other one is is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, man ahdatha fi amrina hadha laysa minhu fahuwa radd. Yeah? That whoever invents in this matter of ours, our deen, will have it rejected, i.e. the innovation. And the third one is this hadith, the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir. The halal is clear and the haram is clear. The one we just went through. Then Abu Dawood, he said, I collected 500,000 ahadith, of which I included 4,800 in my Sunan, Sunan Abu Dawood. Of these, 4 hadith are sufficient for the people. The hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir, that we just covered, the halal is clear and the haram is clear. The hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, and the hadith of none of you truly believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. And the other one is that you don't believe if you do not leave that which does not concern you, i.e. stay away from other things. So this is, you can see from this hadith that, from the statements of Imam Ahmad and Abu Dawood, how important this hadith is. How important this hadith is. So if we want to know about how important it is, let's maybe delve into who the narrator of this hadith is, Nu'man ibn Bashir. So when we look at Nu'man ibn Bashir, how old do you think he was when this hadith was told to him by the Prophet ﷺ? Take any guesses. 12. Any other guesses? You can just take a guess. What do you think? Like, it's a very big hadith, isn't it? Very big and important concept in our deen. Sir? 25. 22. Again, it'll be difficult to know. So, when we look at this hadith, and Nu'man ibn Bashir, he was born in the first year after Hijrah. So when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, he was born in that year, the first Hijrah year. And when the Prophet ﷺ, he performed the tahniq, the chewing of the date or the honey and putting it inside the mouth of the child. He did it with Nu'man ibn Bashir. And this hadith was revealed around 6 or 7 years after the Hijrah. So that makes him how old? 6 or 7. So, Nu'man ibn Bashir was that young. Now this poses a question now, which is, if we now think about any of us who've got a 6 or 7 year old, imagine now we tell this hadith to this child. How much do you think your 6 or 7 year old will comprehend and remember from this hadith? It's just a reality. How much do you think, like, if we should, again, you go back into the hadith, just look at the hadith again in your book, and think, okay, how much will the child comprehend? And the question is how is it then that Nu'man ibn Bashir was able to comprehend something so deep and meaningful and narrate this hadith? And he went on in the chain that we have today. How was this possible? What was so different? He was a child. He wasn't a prophet. He didn't have any miracles. Didn't get any revelation. How was this possible? And one of the key things that always we will come back to is that the society we live in creates our children and the mindset we set for our children. And when you look back for the history of Islam, children and shabab and youth were always the ones who led Islam forward. If you look at the example of, for example, when the Prophet ﷺ got the first revelation, who were the first people that accepted Islam? When he came down from the mountain with Iqra, who's the first person that accepted Islam? His wife, Khadija radiallahu anha. Who's the next one? Yeah, so he's there where you have Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, his thing, but from his family, Ali radiallahu anhu. How old was Ali? Say again? He was a child. He's around, give or take 9 years, between 7 and 9. This is usually what the narration says. So a 7 and 9 year old accepted Islam, fully understanding what the Shahada was, what he meant, to reject all kufr and idol worship, and only worship Allah. And Allah is one, He's alone. They understood the depths of that meaning. Now sometimes when we are raising our children, we're thinking, okay, how much have they grasped and concept of Islam? When we talk about Islam, that they fully comprehended to our 6, 7, 9 year old. So there's obviously an issue here, there's something wrong. It doesn't mean that what we're saying, what we're doing is wrong to our children, but you have to realize the impact of society around us on our child. And why is it children of that generation could comprehend and understand so much, and why is it our ones don't? And the answer usually is that society is dumbing down our children. Everything around us is creating this thing, where a lot of the times as parents, we go around and we say, they do something, oh don't worry, he's only a child. You know, we use this term, only a child. That doesn't mean about reprimanding, like, oh, just let them be, they made a mistake. I'm talking about, if that's the mentality we have, they're only a child. That means, when do they become a man or a woman? When do they become that adult? At what point do we define it? Is it when they're 16? Is it when they're 18? Is it when they're 21? Is it when they're married? Like, at what point? Because we keep on saying they're only just a child. In fact, our children have infinite potential. And what's happening is, what we do around them is we dumb them down. So we create these barriers. I don't want to go into this topic. I was going to talk about education, but there's the whole thing about, we could talk about how deconstruct the educational system, but that also creates these problems, the institutionalized education, and how it's designed to keep children at certain stages in their development. Hence why, you know, one of the things, my children, though I haven't homeschooled them, I'm a big advocate of homeschooling because of, again, unlocking that potential that happens within the child. Those who are able and capable to do that, and you see the educational structures dumb that down. A society around us, everything around us is creating children to become, against, effectively, we're stopping their growth and their potential. And this is the key part we want to see, okay, what is happening? What's creating these obstacles for our children? So, some of the lessons, as I said, that we can take from this hadith. And I want to then take those lessons and we'll delve into them more, inshallah. There's 4 key things that we're going to take lessons, and that will be the structure of today's session. We'll cover each of those 4 segments, inshallah. The first one is, how is it that Al-Nu'man ibn Bashir could potentially have taken this hadith? It's because he was in and around the Prophet ﷺ, which means that he would be having to attend the masjid. So one of the key parts of it is that children should be attending the masjid and being around where learning of Islam is taking place. The second one is spending time in the company of adults. And this is an important aspect, and that's linked with some of the issues we've discussed already. And you see that An-Nu'man ibn Bashir couldn't have done this unless he was in and around other Sahabas and the Prophet ﷺ around and with them. There's a bit we'll delve into, it's a bit vague at the moment, but there's an etiquette of learning. Yeah, and we need to address this point. And the last one is looking introspectively at our habits. And these are the 4 key parts, inshallah, we'll go through in today's session, inshallah. And we'll go through them, inshallah. So at this juncture, if there's any questions regarding what we talked about, we can maybe quickly take anything in regards to that before we start going into each of those sections, inshallah. Yes, sir.
We'll start at the end.
You want to go back? Oh,
No, could we get the slides at the end?
Hey, at the end, inshallah, I can send it over to the brothers to provide that, inshallah. Yes, sir.
Is it like a concept of how you try to get child for 7 years and then being there kind of teacher for 7 and then being your friend?
Yeah, there was a statement that's attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu. Yeah. Though I've done a lot of research into that statement, and it's difficult to 100% say, but it's a lot of people attribute it to Ali radiallahu anhu. He talks about 777. Yeah, where he says that with a child, for the first 7 years of their life, you play with them, and then the next 7 is when you, effectively what it's referred to is that you can use discipline, educate, these kind of words, where you do all of those aspects to that, and then the next 7 years is where you befriend them. And what you tend to find in that journey is the first 7 years, it goes back to the thing I didn't want to talk about, but we could talk about it, which was about the educational structure, that the first 7 years of a child is the time where the child is more open and free, and it's going to be very difficult to get them to sit, for example, behind the desk in that formal learning structure that we've created. So a lot of learning takes through play and adventure and discovery. The next 7 years is the stage of where you instill that more discipline into your child, education, discipline, the ta'deeb within the child in those 7 years. And then when they're 14, when they're in their teen years, when they're baligh, when they're technically Islamically an adult, and this is the years where you now go and start to befriend that child, and the relationship, you see, shifts as a parent. And that's the key part that we need to see in our journey, that generally when the children are young, yes, we're that caregiver, we're that nurture, we're looking after them, we're just raising them. And then there comes a stage of education and discipline, and then comes a stage of where it's changed now. If you now basically be forceful on your child will rebel back. And we find that many times in the teenage years. So that's the stage of where the more befriending takes place, and there's a structure and a way of doing that, and that's the journey that generally that statement. So irrespective of if Ali radiallahu anhu said it or not, even from a psychological perspective, it's actually a correct structure to follow through. And this was one of the bits I was going to mention anyway, which is about just educational structure. What's causing a problem with our children is, if you look at the educational society today, in the Western world, in the UK, schooling, where did it start from? What was the origins of schooling? So the origins of schooling came back to the time was actually where men had gone out to war, and you've got less working people available, and you're talking about post-war societies, and women are a latent manpower who are there just looking after kids. So they needed to get the economy boosted up, so we need to get women into work. So by forcing them into work, what do you do with the kids? So then schooling started effectively as a babysitting structure. So the starting point was that. And then along this journey, it's developed and developed and developed, and we've got this structure of education that we have now. It was never started with the child's best development in mind. It was started from an economic policy. And that's why what you see is there's issues within the schooling structure. You see within there's some places in Germany, in Scandinavia, some states in America, you start formal, where you sit down behind a desk learning from the age of 7. What do we have from here? Nurseries at 3, receptions at 4, then you 5 years old. So they're starting from a very, very young age in that schooling structure. And what you see is, though at the beginning, you look at education and development of a child, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So at the beginning, the UK children compared to some of the Scandinavian children might be ahead, they sprint very fast. But on a long-term development, the Scandinavian children far can outdevelop in terms of understanding knowledge, intellect, everything, than children who are in, for example, the UK. And that's the studies have shown that. And because what the parents do at those first 7 years is they learn through play and discovery. So there's learning taking place. Like, for example, children learn, if you look at everything, everything's learning. Whether it's color blocks or Legos, they're learning about maths and numbers and colors and shapes. So they go outside, about nature. All of that learning can take place in a different kind of setting. And then when you move on to the next 7 years is when they be more adapt to sit down and actually learn. We find that in schools, that sometimes when you lose a teacher for the younger years, we find that children, they can be it's tiring, because they're very energetic, they want to run around, and to kind of get them to sit down and sit down and sit down, it's difficult. And then as they get a bit older, they're a bit more, they're used to it, they're accustomed to it. So you find that structure, and even like the education system, when you talk about how they take the intake of a child, the child who comes in who's born on the 1st of September at 1 minute past midnight, would be in the same academic year as a child who's born the next year, 31st of August at 11:59 p.m. A whole year difference, barring 2 minutes. They're in the same academic year, and they're expected to achieve the same thing. I say that because I was born in July, so I felt the effects of it. I was one of the latter years, and I felt like, what was expected of me compared to my friend who was born in September, it was quite difficult. So the whole structure, again, is wrong, and I'm an advocate for changing that to 6-month years. Intake should be from January to June and July to December. There's a whole movement about that as well, but that's my whole thing about education system, that the way it's structured is wrong. So education in Islam is very important, but not the institution. Institution was never something that technically existed. They were created later on to formalize and structure things. So when we look at the children here, when you create these structures, it's cocooning them into a certain space. So hence why I always say that those who have the ability, I would highly encourage, if you can, it's all based on obviously the ability that you can do it in your situation. Homeschooling creates much more development in your child, and also takes away from a lot of the issues that you're facing anyway, and a lot of concerns parents have within the mainstream schooling system. Okay. Any other questions or anything on this section? Okay, then what we'll do, we'll just take a 5-minute break now, just stretch, a 10-minute break, because I understand the parents came a bit late. Just grab a cup of tea if you need to, just stretch your legs, and then we'll go into each of the 4 sections of shopping.
If anybody did arrive later and you haven't registered, could you just meet us at the desk at the back, and one of my colleagues will register you. Thank you. You're welcome.
No, I'm just going to go to the
very, very much. So I will work as part of this training. So if you don't build that arena first, this is not going to work. It's important to sign for this. And within these confines, it's like trying to stay dry while you're out at sea. It just makes no sense. So you've got to step back and look at the situation and say, so it's really it's not about it's about you creating home, creating that space and environment so that you're keeping these modern philosophical maladies are men don't and none of them are theoretical, they're only human. That deconstructive kind of philosophical work, seeing the symptoms of it. We've got to deal with that. Children don't see a consensus. This is what women, this is what men do, this is what children do. They're constantly, they become deconstructionists. All of these they're very cancerous philosophies, but we don't realize it. We've taken them on board. We're consuming them. Just by sending your kids to school, you've already assumed that economic model of society, you've already assumed separating into your nuclear household, away from grandparents. You've already broken the Hungarian model of society. It's already gone. Every bit of art and culture you consume, how much of it, like if you watch like Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, there is not one child that has a functional, or a family. Where's the parents? There's no parents. This one's adopted and living in a cafe. It's all weird madness, and we don't realize that very subtly influences our ideas. So sometimes this can become very academic, this can just become very theoretical. But connecting those dots and seeing how we actually need to break the system in order for this new growth of Islam to come. And this is something we've seen this year, especially in the there was a massive clearing of whatever was growing there in order for something to grow. And the youth of things like this and you hear things like this is really, I don't think yet within Islamic scholarship which is engaging with the conversation, engaging with this, I don't think they've yet really presented this. even the word revolution, this is an important idea because this idea is in Revelation, even pre-Quran. So even if you go to Torah and Bible, a lot of the prophets are coming to challenge the status quo, and it's something that we've just become, in that same way, disciplined, becoming docile bodies, and just wake up and go deal and try. And that thought, that revolution, that turning around, it's always been there. Even from pre-Islamic prophets, and even after even the idea of Tajdeed, from everything coming, it's a matter of turning around, reorienting, and setting people as you say. Community over here is most of Pakistan. We have one community. We have a very not enough that they make use of. So it's not that gives you an idea. But we do. I mean, I know much of our work. We did. We tried to bring in a Bengali. He's actually from Lorenzo. So there's a little bit of need for that, but unfortunately his mother got the house, it was too difficult. You know, your parents' house is in East London, you know. Mom's not selling up, you know what I mean? So,